Learn how to rig a sailing dinghy. I'm Phil. I've been teaching sailing since I was 16. I'm going to show you how to rig a variety of different sailing dinghies so you can really understand the concepts so that you'll be able to rig any dinghy you come to. So I'll rig 3 single-handers here. So we've got a laser Pico, we've got a Fusion, and we've got the laser or ILCA. I'll also use 2 double-handers, so Wayfarer and a Hartley 15. So first of all, when rigging a boat, we want to make sure the boat is facing the wind, so we're not getting power in the sail. Now, as you can see, it's really flat calm here today, so that's not an issue. If the wind picks up, I might move the boats around into the wind. What we want to avoid is the wind powering up the sail while the boat's on the beach, because it'll make it hard to actually rig up the boat because we're fighting against the wind. Also, there's a chance the boat can blow over on the trolley. These boats don't have a stayed mast, and by that I mean there's no shrouds and the mast comes down every time we use it rather than pulling the sail up with a halyard. So we have a 2-piece mast. So first thing, we need to put the mast together and we need to slide the sail on. The top piece of mast slides into the bottom piece of mast. It's really important here that the rivet here is on the inside or backward side of the mast. So helpfully, laser often put 2 arrows on the mast, but they do come off over time. So if you've got an old boat, you need to look for the rivet and make sure it's directly above the gooseneck where the boom attaches onto the mast. That's because this is a weak point on the mast and it wants to be in compression rather than being pulled under tension if the rivet's on the front. Yeah, when laser masts break, 99% of the time, this is where they break. So when you've got your mast together, we can start to sleeve a sail onto the mast. Now we want to keep these arrows lined up at the join. Also, I've got the mast, so the gooseneck for the boom is in line with the sail. Again, that's important because we don't want to get the sail up and then have a massive twist in the sail. Okay, see here, the gooseneck and the sail are lined up and it's nicely in line all the way up the height of the mast. Putting the mast up can be the hardest bit physically, especially when it's windy. If you line up the bottom of the mast foot with the mast step in the boat, then you can spread the weight and walk your hands up the mast. When it's upright, just drop it in, and on a laser, it's quite normal. You might have a splash of water come out of the mast foot. It's very similar on the Fusion. The mast goes straight into the foot in the boat, and on this one, there's like a notch you have to line up and then spin the mast 180 degrees so that that notch is holding the mast into the boat. On a Pico, okay, we can lift the mast from behind because it has to slot into this gate. Now we need to make sure the gate closes properly, and we've practiced using this pin into the T-shape to hold the mast gate in place because we can't see it and it's quite fiddly. Yeah, so make sure that's nice and secure. So now I've got the mast in, we can unwrap the sail if it's not already, and then the next step is to attach the boom. So unwrap the sail. We have got a bit of breeze now actually, so I've turned the boats around towards the wind. So on the front of the boom, there's either some kind of horseshoe shape which goes onto a bracket on the mast, or like on a laser, it's a pin which goes into the end of the boom. So try and keep hold of the end of the sail, but we want to be careful not holding it too tight and getting wind in the sail. So slide the boom onto the mast. We want to be careful at this point. We want to make sure the main sheet and the kicker are underneath. Yeah, so you've not got the boom on upside down. Now there's normally some kind of hook or shackle to connect the clew of the sail, that's this corner, the clew, to the boom. Okay, once it's on, we want to just tension the sail towards the end of the boom, and normally there's a cleat like this one here. We need to make sure the clew of the sail is attached directly to the boom as well. So see here, the outhaul is pulling the sail in and closer, but because there's no strap, see how the boom's falling down. Now, firstly, that'll give you a lot less room in the boat and you'll bang your head more, but also it means you've got a lot less play in the sail. So when you sheet in, and you know, there's not a lot happening sort of straight away. So we need to put a clew strap on, and we need to make sure that the outhaul and the main sheet do not get trapped inside the strap. So can you see now with the clew strap, the boom height remains the same, so that means we've got better control of the sail. So on the fusion here, see we've just got a rope. So the next thing at the front of the boom is the kicker, and this, make sure it's loose, and then it just clips on to the bottom of the mast. Okay, and then we just want to pull some tension on it, and this is to stop the boom from going up so the wind doesn't spill out. Now it gets a lot more complicated than that, but on this kind of boat these controls are kept very, very simple. And you know, if you're still learning, then don't overcomplicate it. The other thing, we also have a downhaul, or a cunningham as it's also called, on every boat. So this is to hold down the luff of the sail, that's this front edge. So again, there's not very complicated here, just make sure it's attached so that the sail doesn't go flying off up the mast. So working our way backwards along the boat, we just want to make sure we've got everything in place. So here we have a daggerboard which goes down the daggerboard slot here, and it's important to make sure it's attached, and we use elastic so that you can stretch it to get it in and out of the slot, but make sure it's attached so you don't lose it. And in the event of a capsize, you don't want the board to fall upwards sort of out of the boat and then you lose the board. Make sure the main sheet is nice and clear and it's running through the blocks okay. And in the end of the sheet, we should have a figure of 8 stopper knot, and that's to stop the main sheet from coming through the block here if we let go of it on the water or lose control of the sail. Along the boom, my port starboard stickers are available on eBay, help you learn what tack you're on. On boom, we really need to make sure the main sheet goes through this fabric loop in the middle. Okay, and just now, if you miss out the sheet from coming through the loop here, what happens is you get a massive sag in the main sheet. So every time you tack and jibe, it's getting wrapped around your neck when you're coming across the boat, and then it's nice and not twisted at the back. If the boom's been taken off, put in the boat, and then rigged up again, you can end up twisting the boom around in a circle, and then the sheet will be twisted here, and that'll add friction onto the rope. So when you let the sheet out, you can't let the sail out, or you can't pull it in properly. While at the back of the boat, very important to make sure the bung is in. Okay. The rudder and the tiller need to come under this traveller, which is for the main sheet to cross from side to side when we're tacking and jibing. So pass it under there, make sure the tiller extension is in the boat and not stuck under here, and then these metal pintles slot into the gudgeons. So basically you put the pins in the holes. Now on this one there's a spring, so that's to lock it in. Push the spring forward and it'll release it. We're going to move on to double handers now. A lot of the same concepts apply, especially when attaching the mainsail with those 3 control lines. Here we've got a Wayfarer, which is a very popular family dinghy, often found at training centres and very popular with cruising. And then the Hartley 15 here is a very general purpose plastic dinghy. The reason I'm showing you these 2 boats is the systems are slightly different on them, but again we're just looking at the concepts so we can understand how to apply that to any boat in the future. So you'll see there's a lot more wind today than we had with the single handers, and really important therefore to make sure the boat is facing into the wind before we start getting any of the sails up. Now generally I'll start at the bow of the boat and work backwards, and partly that's also because we tension the rig through the jib, and it's much easier to do that without having got the mainsail up the mast. Make sure your sail's not twisted and find the tack of the jib, which is where the sailmaker's logo is, and that will normally attach onto the bow with some form of shackle or pin. Now the reason it's important to start at the tack is if the wind catches the sail, then the sail is going to be held down onto the boat. If you attach the halyard first and a gust of wind catches the sail, it can end up blowing sky high and it's hard to get the sail back down, and you can blow the boat over on the beach. So here I put in a pin, put the ring in. They're really fiddly, careful not to drop them down into the boat, and make sure that the sail's not twisted. If the jib sheets aren't already attached, we can do that now. So find the middle of a rope of the jib sheet, make a bite, like a loop, push it through the eye, and then pull the rest of the sheet through. And then we want to pull this really tight. So this is called a cow hitch or a lark's foot, same knot, two different names. Okay, and then the two sheets go off to each side of the boat. The other ways we can do this is we can tie the sheet on with a bowline or bowline. The problem being there is you're putting a lot more rope by the sail, so it's making the sail heavier. And then, or you could pass the rope through and just have a knot on either side of the sail. Another way of doing it is pass the rope entirely through the eye on the clew of the sail, and then tie a knot, so either a single overhand knot or a figure of eight knot. Just be careful, if you tie a single overhand knot like a pretzel knot, it'll be really hard to get undone once it's been pulled tight, whereas something like this figure of eight will be easier to undo. Again, you're putting more weight of rope on the end of the sail. The next thing we want to do, work your way up the luff of the jib to make sure that it's not twisted to get to the head, and we want to attach the halyards. Now here's one I prepared earlier. We want to make sure all the way up that the halyard is not twisted around the forestay or any other bits of string. Like on here we've got a spinnaker, so I had to untangle it from the spinnaker line. Again, got a shackle which connects. There we go. So the jib's ready to go up. You'll notice the halyard is wire and in the boat it's rope. So we need to pull the sail up until the wire comes out of the bottom of the mast, and then pull the rope out of the way before sitting it onto this metal hook. So this is a high field lever, and this is to tension the rig. It's a mechanical lever. Bit of a finger trapper, so be careful when you're pulling it really tight. So on the Hartley, instead of a high field lever, we've got a pulley system. So here the wire halyard comes out. I pulled the rope element of the halyard out of the way. There's the metal hook, and then here there's a system of pulleys which is a 4-to-1 purchase to tension the jib with. So we physically just pull it harder the more we want to tension a rig. So how much rig tension do you need? Well, here you can see the jib. Can you see how far it's bending away from the mast? Yeah, and I've intentionally got hardly any tension on here just to prove a point. Yeah, so this isn't enough at all. We need to have it tight enough that the front edge of the jib, the luff, is kind of fairly straight as possible to keep the shape of the sail. So the windier it gets, in general, the more tension we're going to have to pull on. So now I've pulled on some more tension, and you can see the luff of the sail is much more kind of upright, much more in line with the mast. So once the jib is up, we want to feed the sheet through the block or the jib car, and then tie a figure of 8 stopper knot in the end. So when we let go of the sheet that's not in use, we don't lose it out of the boat. Now, this jib has a furler, but can you see we've got the forestay and a spinnaker halyard here. So we need to be careful that when we pull the furler, they're probably going to get tangled up. See there, they can get twisted and then the jib can jam. So we need to tie the forestay back to the mast, and if a spinnaker is not in use, we can tie the halyard out of the way as well. That means we can furl the jib without it getting tangled up. Obviously, make sure we tie it back on again before we let the jib down, or the mast is going to fall down. So I've tied the forestay off onto the mast here, so now the furling system's running nice and smoothly. So pull the sheet to unfurl the sail, pull the furling line, put it away. The benefit of that is the sail is not flapping about and the boat's not going to blow over on the trolley while we continue to rig the rest of the boat. We've got the jib up and furled away, out of the way. The next step is to get the mainsail up. On this boat, there's a vang. That's this bar here, which is like a kicker to give you more space in the boat. It's actually the bar is on top. The significance of that for rigging up is we need to know which side the track goes for when we're hoisting the sail. So because this bar is fitted to the starboard side of the mast, I'm hoisting the sail up the port side so it doesn't get tangled. So the first job is to unroll the sail till you find the head. And then attach the halyard onto the head of the sail. So here's the head of the sail. We've made a loop in the end of our halyard. Pass it through and then pass the bobble through that loop, like so. The benefit of doing this knot is that the halyard is pulling directly from the metal cringle here, so the sail can go all the way to the top of the mast. If you were to tie a bowline, it might be that the knot hits the top of the mast and the sail is an inch or two short of being all the way up. So then it's just a case of putting the sail into the track. If there's two of you, one of you can feed the sail into the track while the other one pulls it up. Now, very important here to make sure we're still head to wind, makes it a lot easier. Just going to work it past the vang there. And make sure you don't get twisted up or too much of a sail going into the track in one go. I'm actually going to stop before I get the sail all the way up to the top, because that's when it's easier to attach the boom. Okay, so on this one, the boom, there's a plastic torpedo thing that slides in to the boom track, and then our out haul goes through the clew of the sail and back in to the end of the boom, like so. Then we can pull it up the rest of the way and it's easier for us to reach it. So, and what I tend to do, we've pulled the halyard up here. Now, I always just do a little slip knot just at the block below it, so that if a halyard were to slip through the cleat at all, the sail isn't going to come too far down. And then just pull it to release it when you want to let the sail down at the end of the day. Now, some sails, like on this Wayfarer, the sail actually sleeves entirely into the track in the boom. So you'll need to do this before you start pulling the sail up. So at the front there's a pin that holds the tack. Sleeve it all in and then attach the outhaul on at the end, and then pull the sail at the mast. The cunningham can go on now to pull down the tack and tension the luff of the sail. So go through the metal eye, and on here it just ties off through a little hole in the gooseneck. The reason we come back down is we've got double the purchase by having this extra purchase in it. So it's now going to a 4-to-1. Okay, just tie it off with a stopper knot, and then we actually control the tension in the luff by tensioning it on here. So we need to make sure our kick is attached to control the height of the boom and the tension in the leech of the sail, the back edge. So the vang bar is connected here, we don't take that off, and then you actually adjust it from this block here at the bottom. So the next steps, I've threaded the main sheet here, and it's really important to make sure it's not twisted at all. Any twists in the main sheet are going to mean it's hard to pull the sail in, and the sail might not go out when you ease the sheet. We also need to make sure we put our stopper knot in the end, so when we let go of the sheet it doesn't disappear and we lose it through all the blocks. We also need to put the rudder on. So on this boat, the metal pin here goes through the gudgeons on the back of the boat, and there's a metal ring to secure the pin in place. While at the back, make sure your bung is nice and tight so we don't take water on. All of this excess rope in the boat needs tidying up so it's not a risk to get tangled up. So we're all rigged and ready, so nice and tidy in the boat. We've got rid of all that excess rope. You should only have the main sheet, the jib sheet, your foot straps, and possibly your control lines that you can adjust better in the cockpit. Everything else should be nice and tidy and out of the way. We're ready to go sailing. It's pretty windy today. You might want to reef the sail down to reduce the amount of power you've got. You can learn all about that in this video here.